The mainland was a shock of noise and color and smell. The diesel fumes of the harbor, the shouts of fishermen, the sheer press of people. It felt aggressive, disordered. I stood on the dock, my duffel bag at my feet, and felt a dizzying wave of wrongness. The ground seemed to sway. My hand went to the wall of a fish shed to steady myself. I had done it. 6 weeks of triple pay. My debt, a crushing weight I'd carried for years, was cleared. The bank transfer confirmation was on my phone. I was free. So why did I feel like I'd left a part of myself in that spinning light? My rented room in the coastal town was above a chandlery. It was small, clean, and the window looked out onto an alley. The first thing I did was check the locks. The door had a deadbolt and a chain. I used both. I pulled the single chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. It wasn't in the rules, but it felt correct. Sleep didn't come. The silence was wrong. In the lighthouse, there was always sound. The wind, the groan of the structure, the rhythmic crash of waves, the turning of the great clockwork that spun the lens. Here, the silence was a thick blanket, broken only by distant, meaningless sounds. A car passing, a drunk singing, a dog barking. They had no pattern. They held no information. At 2:10 a.m., I was wide awake. My body was braced for the metallic clang on the gallery. It didn't come. The absence was more startling than the sound would have been. I got up and paced the small room. 11 paces one way, 7 the other. I counted them. I did this 3 times. In the morning, I went to a diner. The coffee tasted thin, insubstantial. The water from the tap tasted dead, neither salty nor fresh. I pushed it away. I found myself cataloging the room. 4 exits, front door, kitchen door, 2 restrooms, 12 tables, 23 patrons. I noted the man in the corner booth who never touched his food, just stirred his coffee clockwise endlessly. After 5 minutes of observation, I decided he was just a man, not an anomaly. My heart slowed. A week passed. I tried to be normal. I walked the town. I applied for jobs, mechanic work, dockhand positions. My resume had a 6-week gap I simply labeled private contract work. My hands, however, betrayed me. They were steady, but they performed tiny, meaningless checks. Aligning cutlery perfectly parallel on the diner table. Counting my change twice before putting it in my pocket. Arranging the tins in my cupboard with labels facing outward, in alphabetical order. The money was a number in an account. It didn't feel real. The rules felt real. On the 8th day, a letter arrived. Thick, cream-colored paper. No return address. My name and the chandlery's address were typed neatly. Inside was a single sheet. Mr. Keeper, your service was noted as satisfactory. Your updated protocols have been archived. An opportunity exists for a role with greater responsibility and commensurate compensation. The terms are 5 times your previous rate for a rotation of 8 weeks. The location is remote. The rules are more complex. If interested, be at the North Dock, berth 7, at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Ask for Captain Rye. Burn this letter. I read it 3 times. 5 times the pay. 8 weeks. My debt was gone, but what did I have? A small room, a silence I couldn't fill, and a mind that now ran on tracks of procedure and threat. The job had broken something in me, but it had also given me a purpose, a terrible, precise purpose. I burned the letter in the metal wastebasket, watching the paper curl and blacken. I counted the seconds until the last ember died. 27. The next day at 2:55 p.m., I was at berth 7. It was a worn-down pier used by rusted research vessels and hardy private craft. The boat tied there was the Oster, a 40-foot trawler that had seen better decades. A man in a patched canvas jacket smoked a pipe on deck. "Captain Rye?" I asked. He looked me up and down, his eyes pale and assessing in a wind-burned face. "You're the keeper." It wasn't a question. "I am. Get aboard." The Oster's engine coughed to life. We didn't head out to the open sea. Instead, Captain Rye took us north along the coast, staying within sight of land. The journey lasted 4 hours. He didn't speak. I stood at the stern, watching the wake, counting the buoys we passed. At 16, he finally cut the engine, letting the boat drift toward a lonely concrete jetty that jutted from a rocky, forested shore. There were no houses, no lights. The trees here were taller, darker. "End of the line," he grunted. "Up there." He nodded toward a path that led from the jetty into the woods. "No lighthouse?" He gave a short, barking laugh that held no humor. "Not that kind of place. Your predecessor is up there. He'll brief you. Supplies are stocked. My job's to drop you and fetch you in 8 weeks, if you're here." I shouldered my bag. "And if I'm not?" He relit his pipe. "Then I wait 1 hour and I leave. Same as with the last one." The implication hung in the salt air. I stepped onto the jetty. The Oster's engine roared as he reversed, turning back the way we came without another glance. The path was narrow, carpeted in pine needles. It climbed steadily away from the shore. The silence of the woods was different from the islands, deeper, muffled. I counted my steps. At 203, the trees opened into a clearing. The structure was not a lighthouse. It was a low, long building, made of dark stone and timber, like an old forestry outpost or a forgotten academic field station. It had a squat, stubborn look to it. Smoke curled from a stone chimney. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light within. He was older than Armitage, with a close-cropped white beard and sharp eyes. He wore a thick, cable-knit sweater. He didn't smile. "You're punctual," he said. "Come in, quickly." I entered. The main room was a combination of living quarters and operations center. One wall was dominated by a large map of the region, dotted with pins and annotations. Another held shelves of old ledgers and equipment, Geiger counters, barometers, seismic readers. A bank of monitors on a desk showed grainy black and white footage of the clearing, the jetty, and several angles of the surrounding forest. They were all live, all empty. "My name is Clay," the man said, bolting the door behind me. It had 3 bolts, I noted, top, middle, bottom. "You have my notes." "I have no notes. I was told you'd brief me." Clay's eyes narrowed. "They didn't give you the packet? The protocols?" "I was given a letter. It said to come here." He muttered something under his breath, then strode to a heavy iron-bound chest beside the desk. He unlocked it with a key from around his neck and withdrew a thick, bound notebook and a folded sheet of paper. He handed me the paper first. "This is the core list. You read it now. You memorize it. You do not leave this building without knowing it backwards. The notebook is my personal log. It contains clarifications, incident reports, and the amendments. You will read it after." I unfolded the paper. The type was the same as the first list. My eyes scanned the numbered points, and a cold familiarity settled in my gut. 1. The clearing perimeter is a fixed boundary marked by 9 white stones. Do not cross this boundary between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. If you must retrieve something from beyond the stones after hours, use the retrieval pole from the equipment locker. Do not reach past the stones with any part of your body. 2. The forest has no paths except the one you arrived on. If you see another path, especially one that appears well-traveled, do not enter it. Mark its location with a red flag from the supply cache and note it in the log. 3. At 9 p.m., 1 a.m., and 5 a.m., you must walk the interior perimeter of the building. Check all 12 windows and 3 doors. The check must be completed in 9 minutes exactly. Use the stopwatch. 4. The radio in the main room is for outgoing communication only. Daily check-in at 0800. The radio in the sleeping quarters is for receiving. It will activate at 11:11 p.m. every night. Listen for 3 minutes. You will hear a list of numbers. Transcribe them exactly into the red ledger. Do not respond. 5. Water is drawn from the well 50 paces east of the building. The pump requires exactly 30 strokes to prime. The water should be clear and cold. If it comes up warm or murky, do not drink it. Seal the well with the weighted cover and use reserve supplies. 6. You will hear voices in the forest. They may call your name or the name of someone you know. They may sound distressed. Do not answer. Do not approach the windows when you hear them. Turn on the white noise generator, switch B, panel 2, until they cease. 7. Animals here are not to be trusted. Deer may have too many or too few legs. Birds may watch you without turning their heads. If an animal behaves in a statistically anomalous way, note it in the log, but do not interact. 8. The generator runs on a schedule, 1800-600. Refuel at 1700 daily. The fuel level must never fall below 40%. There's a secondary silent battery bank for the monitors and radios. Its charge must be verified at noon. 9. A supply drop will occur every 14 days at precisely 2 p.m. at the jetty. The boat will sound its horn 3 times. You must respond with 2 flashes from the signal lamp. If the horn sequence is different, or if no boat is visible, do not respond. Return to the station and lock down. 10. Your reflection in any window after dark may lag by approximately 2 seconds. This is normal. If it acts independently or speaks, close the curtain and do not look at that window again until sunrise. 11. The previous keeper, Clay, is leaving. If you see a man matching my description in or around the station after my departure, he will be wearing a green sweater. Do not acknowledge him. The real Clay's sweater is gray. I looked up. His sweater was the color of wood ash. Questions of clarity only, Clay said, not of purpose. The numbers on the receiver radio, what are they? You transcribe them. You do not analyze them. They are a diagnostic. Wrong numbers or a missed transmission indicates a problem with the environment. The well. If it's contaminated, how long do reserve supplies last? 14 days. The next drop will replenish. If the well is compromised, it's often temporary. Test it every 3rd day after sealing. He showed me the rest. The sleeping quarters were sparse, a cot, the receiver radio, a small desk with the red ledger. The operation room held the monitors, the main radio, the weather station, and the various sensors. A small kitchenette, a bathroom, a storage room packed with supplies, including the retrieval pole, a 10-foot aluminum rod with a mechanical grabber on the end. This is not a place of observation like your lighthouse, Clay said, his voice low. This is a place of containment. The forest is active. The rules are not just for your safety. They are maintenance. You are a custodian. Your compliance keeps things in balance. Non-compliance creates openings. Openings for what? He fixed me with a stare. You don't need to know what's on the other side of a door to know you should keep it locked. He spent the next 3 hours drilling me on procedures, the interior patrol route, the exact sequence for priming the well, the location of each of the 9 boundary stones, which I had to verify from the windows. He had me practice with the retrieval pole, picking up a weighted sack he'd placed just beyond the white stones. At 5 p.m., he went to the chest and took out the bound notebook. He handed it to me. My log. Read it tonight. It contains the amendments. They are not suggestions. They are additions to the core list, earned by experience. How many amendments? 6, he said. And there are 3 emergency protocols listed at the back. Pray you don't need them. He packed a small bag. At 5:55 p.m., he stood at the door, his hand on the top bolt. The boat will be at the jetty for me at 6. I will walk the path. You will lock this door behind me. You will not watch me go. You will begin your first interior patrol at 6:09 p.m. Precisely. Understood? Understood. He opened the door, stepped out into the deepening twilight, and pulled it shut behind him. I threw the 3 bolts. The sound was final. I went to the monitor bank. On the screen for the jetty camera, I saw Clay's figure walking down the path. He did not look back. A small boat with a single running light waited. He got in. The boat turned and vanished into the gloom. I was alone. The station hummed with a different energy than the lighthouse. It felt older, more grounded. The threat wasn't from the sea, but from the land itself, from the dense, watching woods. At 6:09 p.m., I picked up the stopwatch. I began the interior patrol. Front door, locked, 3 bolts. Window 1, south-facing, latch secure. Window 2, window 3. I moved methodically, a soldier on a fortified line. I completed the circuit in 8 minutes and 47 seconds. I noted the time in the logbook on the desk. At 9 p.m., I did it again. 9 minutes exactly. I refueled the generator at 5 p.m., as instructed. The gauge read 68%. I prepared a meal from tins. I tried to eat. The food was fuel. At 11:11 p.m., the receiver radio in the sleeping quarters crackled to life with a burst of static. I sat at the desk, pen poised over the red ledger. A calm, automated female voice began speaking, devoid of inflection. Sequence follows: 7, 14, 3, 9, 16, 2, 11, 8, 5, 13, 1, 10, 15, 12, 4, end sequence. I wrote the numbers exactly as spoken. They made no mathematical sense. They weren't consecutive, nor were they a known code. I closed the ledger. The radio fell silent. I lay on the cot, but sleep was a distant country. The forest was loud with night sounds, creaks, rustles, the call of an owl. Then, around 1 a.m., a new sound threaded through them. A voice, muffled by distance and trees, but clear enough to distinguish words. "Hello? Is someone there? I'm lost." It was a woman's voice, young, frightened. My muscles tensed. Rule 6, do not answer. Do not approach the windows. "Please, I can see a light. Can you help me?" The voice was closer now. It sounded genuine, cracked with tears. Every human instinct screamed to respond, to help. I got up. I did not go to the window. I went to panel 2 in the operations room and flipped switch B. A low, rushing sound filled the speakers in the walls, a synthesized blend of rain and wind. It drowned out the external noises. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the white noise. I could no longer hear the voice. After 10 minutes, I turned the generator off. The forest was silent. I completed my 1 a.m. patrol. 9 minutes, all secure. At 5 a.m., patrol done. I finally slept for 2 hours. The days took on a new terrestrial rhythm. Mornings were for maintenance and inventory. I checked the battery bank, 97% charge. I took the metal pitcher and at exactly 10 a.m., walked the 50 paces to the well. The forest here felt still, watchful. I counted the 30 strokes of the pump. The water came clear and cold. I filled the pitcher and returned, my neck prickling the whole way. I walked the clearing perimeter inside the white stones, verifying all 9 were in place. They were lichen-covered, but unmistakable. On the 3rd day, during this check, I saw it, a path. It began between the 5th and 6th stones, heading north into the woods. It was not overgrown. The ground was packed, as if by frequent use. Ferns were bent back from its entrance. It looked inviting, a clear trail in the tangled undergrowth. Rule 2. If you see another path, mark its location with a red flag. Note it in the log. I returned to the station, retrieved a red flag on a metal spike from the supply cache, and walked back. I did not step over the white stones. I thrust the flag into the ground at the edge of the clearing, pointing toward the path's entrance. In the log, I wrote, Day 3, 10:47 a.m. New path observed, northern sector, between stones 5 and 6. Flag placed. That night, the voice returned. This time, it was a man's voice, gruff with pain. My ankle, I think it's broken. I just need a phone. Hello? The white noise generator swallowed his pleas. The numbers came every night at 11:11. The sequence was different each time, but always 16 numbers, each between 1 and 16, with no repeats. I transcribed them dutifully. They were a nonsensical litany. On the 7th night, during the 1 a.m. patrol, I saw the anomaly on the monitors before I saw it in the room. Monitor 4 showed the eastern tree line. Something was standing just beyond the white stones. It was tall, man-shaped, but its proportions were off. The arms too long, the head slightly too small. It was perfectly still, facing the station. I kept walking my route. Window 8, east-facing. I did not look directly out. From my peripheral vision, I could see the shape in the darkness, a deeper black against the trees. I completed my check at the window latch, turned, and continued to window 9. When I passed monitor 4 again on my circuit, the figure was gone. I wrote in the log, 1:02 a.m., stationary figure east perimeter, complied with patrol procedure, no direct engagement. I opened Clay's notebook that night after the numbers transmission. The early entries were dry, weather notes, supply lists, minor anomalies. Fox observed with symmetrical markings, possible coincidence. Then the entries grew longer, the handwriting tighter. Amendment 1. The white noise generator is effective, but voices may attempt to bypass it by mimicking internal sounds. If you hear a voice that seems to come from inside the walls or from the ventilation shaft, do not investigate. Increase generator to setting 2 for 30 minutes. Amendment 2. The path phenomenon is recurrent. New paths may appear overnight. Flag them. Do not, under any circumstances, place a flag on an existing path. This is an invitation. Amendment 3. The figure by the stones is a recurrent probe. It has never crossed the stones. If you see it within the clearing, emergency protocols are initiated. See back. Amendment 4. The well water diagnostic. After drawing, let a sample sit in a clear glass for 1 hour. If a sediment forms that moves against the direction of swirl when stirred, the water is compromised for 72 hours minimum. Amendment 5. The receiver numbers are a diagnostic of perimeter integrity. A repeated number, or a number above 16, indicates a breach in the boundary. Respond with immediate action sequence alpha. See emergency protocols. Amendment 6. Clay in a green sweater may appear at the door. He will know things, personal things, to persuade you. He will claim there's an emergency with the supply boat. Do not listen. Do not open the door. Play the recorded message from tape 1 through the door speaker. It will leave. The notebook sent a deeper chill through me than the core list had. These were learned behaviors, specific counters to observed tactics. The thing outside wasn't just a presence. It was intelligent, adaptable. It tested. The emergency protocols at the back were spare, dire. A. Immediate action sequence alpha. Initiate upon numerical anomaly or visual confirmation of intruder within stones. 1. Secure all doors and windows internally with secondary locks, steel bars in storage. 2. Power down main generator. Switch to silent battery bank only. 3. Do not patrol. Monitor from center of operations room. Speak only to recite the boundary litany. C card on desk. 4. Wait for sunrise. B. Extended containment procedure if intrusion persists or multiple anomalies manifest. 1. Initiate alpha. 2. At 1-minute intervals, activate the perimeter lights in sequence. Panel 3, switches 1 to 9. 3. Do not sleep. 4. If voices manifest inside, put on provided headphones and play tape 2 on loop. C. Last resort. The station is equipped with a dispersion charge in the foundation. The trigger is under the floor panel in the operations room, keyed to a physical switch. Use only if silence falls completely for more than 30 minutes during an active breach. This is not an escape plan. The last line hung in the air. This is not an escape plan. On the morning of the 14th day, I prepared for the supply drop. At 1:55 p.m., I was at the jetty, signal lamp in hand. At 2 p.m. precisely, 3 short blasts of a horn echoed across the water. The Auster appeared, rounding the headland. I raised the lamp and flashed it twice. Captain Rye guided the boat to the jetty, tossed a line, and began unloading crates without a word. I helped him carry them to the foot of the path. "Everything in order?" he grunted, his only words. "Yes." He nodded, cast off, and was gone. I used a foldable cart to haul the crates up to the station, 1 load at a time. It took 4 trips. As I was returning from the 3rd trip, I saw him. A man standing at the edge of the clearing, just inside the white stones near the new path I had flagged. He was wearing a green sweater. My breath caught. Rule 11 from the core list. Amendment 6 from the notebook. Do not acknowledge. He saw me. He took a step forward, raising a hand. He was Clay's double, same white beard, same sharp eyes, same build. But the sweater was a vibrant, unnatural evergreen. "Thank God," the figure called, his voice a perfect match for Clay's gravelly tone. "I couldn't make the boat. Radio's out. There's a problem with the next drop. They've moved the schedule. I need to update the protocols." I kept walking, pushing the cart, my eyes fixed on the station door 30 yards away. "Did you hear me?" he called, urgency edging his voice. "This is critical. Open the door. We need to talk inside. It's not safe out here." I reached the door. I unlocked it, dragged the cart inside. "Don't be a fool!" the voice shouted, now with a hint of anger. "I know things about you. Your mother's name was Clara. You're here because of debt." A cold jolt went through me. How could it know that? I slammed the door, threw the bolts. My heart was pounding. I went to the operations room. On the desk was a small handheld tape recorder and a speaker grill set into the wall by the door. Tape 1 was already loaded. I pressed play. A low, droning tone issued from the speaker, followed by a series of clicks and whirs that sounded almost mechanical. then a high-pitched sine wave that cycled up and down. It was a jarring, abrasive sound. I watched on the door camera monitor. The figure in the green sweater flinched at the noise, taking a step back. Its face, so perfectly Clay's, contorted in what looked like frustration, then smoothed into an expressionless mask. It turned and walked back toward the tree line, not using the path, but melting between the trees. The recording ended. Silence returned. I leaned against the desk, my hands shaking. It had used personal information. It was learning. It was adapting. The siege, I realized, had already begun. It was just probing the walls, and I had 8 weeks to go. The encounter with the green-sweatered Clay shifted something fundamental. Before, the rules had been about preventing something from happening. Now, I understood they were about holding a line that was under constant, intelligent pressure. The station wasn't a shelter. It was a fortress under observation. I began Clay's notebook in earnest, treating it not as a log, but as a tactical manual. I cross-referenced entries with dates, looking for patterns. I found one: incidents clustered around the pod, new moon, and the full moon. The voice slurs were more frequent, the path appearances more common. I had arrived during a waning gibbous. The new moon was in 9 days. My routines became more than habit. They became ceremony. The 9-minute patrols were performed with military precision. I started using the stopwatch's lap function to time each window check, ensuring no part of the route was rushed or delayed. I began testing the well water daily, not every third day, letting the glass sit for the full hour and watching for the unnatural sediment. It remained clear. The numbers each night continued, a cryptic pulse from somewhere. On the 18th night, the sequence contained a repeat: 7, 14, 3, 9, 16, 2, 11, 11, 5. My pen stopped. A repeated number indicates a breach in the boundary. I set down the pen. I went to the operations room. I did not panic. I followed Amendment 5, triggering immediate action sequence alpha. First, the secondary locks. They were heavy steel bars that slid into brackets on the door and window frames. I secured all 3 doors and 12 windows. The soft thunk of each bar seating home was a satisfying sound of finality. Next, I powered down the main generator. The lights flickered, then steadied as the system switched to the silent battery bank. The monitors remained on, their glow a soft green in the darkened room. The hum of the generator died, leaving an eerie quiet. I stood in the center of the operations room, under the single overhead light powered by the batteries. On the desk was a laminated card with the boundary litany. I began to recite it aloud, my voice steady and clear. The boundary is 9 stones. The boundary is fixed. The boundary is marked. The boundary is clean. The boundary holds. I repeated it. Every minute on the minute, I would stop, check the monitors in a slow, sweeping scan, then begin the litany again. On the 3rd repetition, I saw movement on monitor 3, showing the western tree line. The tall, long-armed figure was back. It stood just outside the stones. Then it took a step forward. It was now inside the clearing. My voice almost faltered. If you see it within the clearing, emergency protocols are initiated. The figure didn't approach the station. It began to walk with a slow, stiff gait along the inside of the white stone circle. It was patrolling my perimeter. I kept reciting. The boundary is 9 stones. The boundary is fixed. The thing completed 1 full circuit, then stopped directly in front of the station's main door, about 20 yards out. It stood facing the building. I could see no details on the grainy monitor. just a silhouette of wrongness. Then a sound, not through the speakers. A physical sound, a faint scritch, scritch, scritch at the door, like claws lightly dragging down the wood. I increased the volume of my recitation. The boundary is 9 stones. The boundary is fixed. The scratching stopped. On the monitor, the figure turned and walked back to the tree line, stepping over the stones and disappearing into the blackness. I continued the litany for another hour. The monitors showed nothing. At 4:30 a.m., with the sky beginning to lighten to a deep gray, I stopped. I waited, silent, until the first true rays of sun touched the clearing, illuminating the 9 white stones. Only then did I power the generator back on, unseal the secondary locks, and resume normal operations. My log entry was brief. Night 18, repeated number in sequence. Alpha protocol initiated. Intruder within perimeter for approximately 20 minutes. Litany maintained. Intruder departed prior to sunrise. The experience left me drained but grimly satisfied. The rules had worked. The procedures had held the line. The new moon arrived. The forest outside became a pit of darkness, the tree line dissolving into a unified wall of black. The voices began earlier, just after sunset. They were more varied now. A child, sobbing. A woman singing a lullaby I vaguely recognized from my own childhood. The gruff man with the broken ankle returned, but now his voice was right outside window 5, whispering, "I can see you in there. Just let me in. It's so cold." The white noise generator was on almost constantly. I kept it on setting 2, as per Amendment 1. The rushing sound was a wall in my ears. On the second night of the new moon, the well test showed the sediment. I had poured the glass of water at 10 p.m. after my final exterior task. At 11 p.m., I shone my flashlight on it. A fine, silty substance had settled at the bottom. Using a glass stirrer, I gently stirred the water clockwise. The sediment swirled, then, against the current, coalesced into a tiny counterclockwise vortex for a split second before dispersing. Rule Amendment 4. The water is compromised for 72 hours minimum. I sealed the well with the heavy lead-lined cover. I noted the time and the exact observation in the log. I had 14 days of reserve. This was a manageable setback. The real test came on the 3rd new moon night. During my 1 a.m. patrol, I heard a new sound. It wasn't a voice. It was a perfect mimic of the station's own noises. The click of the thermostat. The faint buzz of a faulty light bulb in the storage room. The sound of my own footsteps echoing from the wrong direction. Then a voice, but it didn't come from outside. It seemed to emanate from the ventilation grate in the floor of the operations room. It was Mara's voice, the dispatcher from the Lighthouse. "Keeper, come in. Emergency update. Your relief assignment has been canceled. You are to evacuate immediately. A boat is approaching the jetty now. Do you copy?" It was so convincing. The tone, the cadence, the use of keeper. My hand twitched toward the main radio microphone. But the rule was ironclad. The main radio was for outgoing only. And the real Mara wouldn't use that channel to contact me here. She wasn't my dispatcher anymore. I did not answer. I went to panel 2 and turned the white noise generator to its maximum setting. The rush of sound filled the room, drowning out the vent voice. After 30 minutes, I turned it down. The false sounds did not return. That was the night I started sleeping with the retrieval pole beside my cot. Not that I thought it was a weapon, but it was a tool for maintaining distance, for interacting with the outside without crossing the line. It was a symbol of the rules. The moon began to wax again. The pressure seemed to lessen, The voices became sporadic. The figure by the stones was not seen. The well water test on the 4th day was clear. I unsealed it and resumed use. I was nearing the end of my 4th week when I found the second path. It appeared after a night of heavy rain. This one began between stones 7 and 8 on the western side. It was even more defined than the first, with what looked like fresh footprints, human-shaped but elongated, leading into the woods. I placed a second red flag. That afternoon, during my routine monitoring of the screens, I saw an animal, a deer, stepping into the clearing from the north. It moved gracefully, then stopped to browse on some low bushes. It looked normal. Then it turned its head to look at the station. Its eyes reflected the camera's IR light with a solid opalescent sheen, like a cat's, and it had no pupils, just 2 blank white orbs. It stared at the camera for a full minute, unblinking, before turning and walking back into the forest. Its gait was fluid, normal, only the eyes were wrong. I noted it in the log. Deer observed, ocular anomaly, no interaction. Days bled into a tense procedural week. My world was the 9-minute patrol, the well, the numbers, the logs. The isolation was more profound than at the lighthouse. There, I had the vastness of the sea. Here, I was buried in the woods, the trees pressing in. The second supply drop on day 28 was uneventful. Captain Rye arrived on time, 3 horn blasts. I gave the 2 flashes. We exchanged crates in silence. As he prepared to leave, he looked at me, his pipe clenched in his teeth. "Still here," he said, not quite a question. "Still here." Halfway, he grunted and pushed off. Halfway, 4 weeks down, 4 to go. The pay was accumulating in an account I never checked. Money had ceased to have meaning. The only currency here was compliance. A few days later, the forest went quiet. Not the normal quiet of an absent breeze, but a dead, muffled silence. The birds stopped singing. The insects ceased their chirping. It was as if the woods were holding their breath. That night, the number sequence was wrong. Not a repeat, but an omission. The automated voice listed only 15 numbers. 7, 14, 3, 9, 16, 2, 11, 8, 5, 13, 1, 10, 15, 12, 4. End sequence. I checked my transcription. 15, not 16. I listened to the static for a full minute, waiting for a 16th. It never came. A missed transmission indicates a problem with the environment. I initiated Alpha Protocol again. Secondary locks, generator off, battery power. I stood in the center and began the litany. The boundary is 9 stones. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. The monitors showed an empty, silent clearing. The dead quiet from outside seeped into the station. It was unnerving. Then, at 2:17 a.m., every monitor flickered simultaneously. When the image returned, each screen showed the same thing. A close-up view of tree bark, as if the cameras were now pointed at the trunks of the trees at the clearing's edge. I could no longer see the clearing itself. I kept reciting the litany, but my eyes were fixed on the bank of screens. On monitor 7, the image shifted slightly. Something moved past the camera. A dark shape, blurry. Then a sound in the station, a soft thump from the roof, then another over by the east wall. Something was on the building. Scratching sounds, now on the roof, now on the walls. Not the focused scratching of the long-armed figure, but a scattered, multi-point scrabbling, like many small hands or claws. I raised my voice. "The boundary is fixed. The boundary is marked." A new monitor flickered, the one for the interior of the storage room. It showed the shelves, the supplies, And there, in the corner, was a shape, small, crouched. It looked like a fox, but its fur was matted and dark, and its head was turned completely around on its neck, staring up at the camera lens. It was inside. My blood went cold. Amendment 5 had said a repeated number indicated a boundary breach. It said nothing about a missed number. This was new. This was inside the perimeter, inside the building itself. The emergency protocols only covered intrusion within the stones. There was no procedure for something inside the structure. The thing on the screen didn't move. It just stared. The scratching on the roof intensified. A faint, chittering laughter seemed to filter down through the ceiling vents, a sound like breaking glass and rustling leaves. I broke protocol. I stopped the litany. I needed the notebook. I moved to the desk, my eyes darting between the storage room monitor and the others. The fox thing remained. I flipped open Clay's log to the emergency protocol section. My finger traced down the list. Alpha for boundary breach. Beta for persistent intrusion. Gamma. C, last resort. Use only if silence falls completely for more than 30 minutes during an active breach. Silence hadn't fallen. This was active. But was it a breach? The boundary was the stones. The station was inside. Something was inside the station. Think. The rules were about order, about definitions. The storage room was a threshold within a threshold. I left the desk and went to the storage room door. It was unlocked. I never locked it. I closed it now and slid the simple barrel bolt across. It was a flimsy lock, not like the main doors. The scratching on the roof stopped. On the monitor, the fox thing in the storage room turned its head. Its body still facing away, back to a normal position. It stood up on its hind legs in a grotesquely human posture and took a shuffling step toward the door. Then it faded from view, as if dissolving into the shadows between the shelves. The interior camera showed an empty room. I returned to the center of the operations room. I did not resume the litany. I stood perfectly still, watching the monitors. The images were still fixed on tree bark. The silence was absolute. I waited. The chronometer on the wall ticked. 10 minutes of silence. 20, 25. At 28 minutes, the main radio crackled to life. Not the receiver, the outgoing set. A voice, mangled by static but recognizable as Captain Rise, burst forth. Station, Mayday, engine failure. Drifting toward your shore. Require immediate jettisoning cargo. Prepare for... The transmission cut. It was a perfect lure. A maritime emergency. A familiar voice. A logical reason to break the rules. To go outside. To approach the jetty after dark. I looked at the chronometer. 3:01 a.m., Rule 9. If the horn sequence is different, or if no boat is visible, do not respond. This wasn't a horn. It was a radio call. But the principle was the same. It was an unsolicited, after-dark communication about a vessel. I did not respond. I did not move. The silence returned, deeper than before. At 3:31 a.m., the 30-minute mark of continuous silence was reached. Last resort protocol conditions were now met. Silence falls completely for more than 30 minutes during an active breach. My eyes went to the floor panel in the operations room. A small recessed ring indicated its location. The dispersion charge. This is not an escape plan. Was this it? Was the silent, waiting thing inside the storage room the prelude to a final assault? Was the charge a way to scorch the earth, to deny whatever was coming? I knelt. I hooked my fingers into the ring and pulled. The panel came up easily. Beneath was a small cavity. In it lay a single, red-handled switch, like a circuit breaker. There was no label, no instructions beyond Clay's ominous note. I did not touch it. Instead, I stood up. I went to the storage room door. I listened. Nothing. I went to panel 3, the one for the perimeter lights. I had never used them. The switches were numbered 1 through 9, corresponding to the sectors around each boundary stone. I began flipping them, one at a time, at 1-minute intervals, as per Extended Containment Procedure Beta. Switch 1, a floodlight near Stone 1, blazed to life, illuminating that sector of the clearing in stark white. 1 minute. Switch 2, light near Stone. 2, 1 minute. Switch 3. As each light flared, I watched the monitors. The cameras were still fixed on the trees. Nothing moved. Switch 4, switch 5. On the monitor for Stone 6's sector, I saw something retreat from the edge of the light, a fluid shadow slipping back into the woods. Switch 6, switch 7. The scratching did not return. The chittering laughter was gone. Switch 8, switch 9. The entire clearing was now illuminated, a perfect island of light in the black sea of forest. It felt exposed, vulnerable, but also defined. The boundary was visible, undeniable. I stood at the window, peering through a slit in the shutter. The clearing was empty. The white stones glowed under the artificial sun. I stayed at the window until the first hint of dawn bleached the eastern sky. Only then did I power down the perimeter lights, switch the generator back on, and unseal the secondary locks. My first act at sunrise was to open the storage room. It was empty. The air was cold and smelled faintly of wet fur and damp earth. Nothing was out of place on the shelves. I took a bag of salt from the supply and poured a thin line across the storage room threshold. It was not a rule. It just felt correct. In the log, I wrote, night of day. 32, missed number in sequence. Alpha initiated. Secondary interior manifestation, storage room. Beta lights employed. Manifestation departed before dawn. Salt line applied to interior threshold. I was entering uncharted territory. The rulebook was incomplete. I was now writing amendments through sheer survival. The week that followed was a tense, grinding stalemate. The forest's unnatural silence broke, replaced by a resumption of normal, or normally abnormal, sounds. The voices returned, but they were fainter, less inventive. The tall figure was seen twice, but always outside the stones. The number sequence returned to its full 16 digits, flawlessly unique each night. I was changing. I caught myself speaking the boundary litany under my breath while performing mundane tasks. I measured my food portions by weight. I timed my showers to the second. The line between rigorous procedure and compulsive ritual had vanished. The rules were no longer external instructions. They were the architecture of my mind. On the morning of day 40, I discovered the third path. This one didn't start at the clearing's edge. It started inside the clearing. I was performing my morning stone verification, walking the interior of the perimeter. Between stones 3 and 4, a patch of moss and low blueberry bushes had been disturbed. The earth was exposed, forming a narrow track that led from the center of the clearing toward the stones. It was as if something had been dragged from the station toward the woods. But the track stopped dead at the white stones, not crossing them. It was a path that went nowhere, or a path that was waiting to be finished. A deep, atavistic dread settled in my stomach. This was escalation. The outside wasn't just probing the boundary. It was attempting to grow a tendril from the inside out. I placed a red flag at the station end of the track and noted it in the log with a detailed sketch. That night, the receiver radio presented a new anomaly. The automated voice delivered the 16 numbers as usual. But after end sequence, there was a pause, then 3 more words, spoken in the same flat tone. Stone 4 compromised. Then dead air. I sat in the silent sleeping quarters, the words echoing. Was this part of the diagnostic, or was it a lure trying to get me to go out and inspect a specific part of the perimeter after dark? Clay's notebook offered no guidance. A voice giving specific, actionable information was new. I decided on a hybrid approach. I would not go out at night, but I would treat Stone 4 as a potential vulnerability. At first light, I would perform an enhanced inspection. Dawn was a gray, drizzly affair. I completed my patrols, and after my morning well run, I approached Stone 4. It looked identical to the others, lichen, solid, unmoved. I circled it. I examined the ground around it. Nothing seemed amiss. Then I looked at the stone itself closely. On the side facing the woods, the lichen pattern was different. It wasn't missing or scraped off. It had grown or been arranged into a shape. A rough but unmistakable shape of a hook. The same hooked shape as the piece of seaweed left on my lighthouse doorstep. My breath caught. It was a sign, a signature, or a taunt. I did not touch the stone. I returned to the station and wrote a new amendment in the back of my own logbook, not Clay's. I labeled it Temporary Directive 1. Upon receipt of specific locational data from the receiver, if verifiably anomalous, the indicated area is to be treated as a Class 2 hazard during daylight hours. No direct contact, observation only from a distance of no less than 10 feet. Enhanced monitoring of associated sector after dark. I was rulemaking now. The realization was both terrifying and steadying. The next supply drop, day 42, was different. Captain Rye sounded his 3 horns. I flashed twice. But as the Oster approached the jetty, I saw a second figure on deck. It was a woman bundled in a coat, her face pale. Rye tied up. He jerked a thumb at the woman. Your relief trainer, Lena. She's observing the last month of your rotation. Standard procedure for extended postings. The woman, Lena, gave me a tight professional nod. She had keen, intelligent eyes that scanned the jetty, the path, the tree line with a swift, assessing gaze. She carried a single, heavy-looking duffel. Keeper, she said. Her voice was low, calm. Ma'am. We unloaded the supplies in silence. My mind was racing. A second person. The rules were built for a solo keeper. How did they apply to 2? Were there protocols for this? Clay had never mentioned a relief trainer. As Rye prepared to leave, Lena spoke to him quietly. He nodded, his expression unreadable, and cast off. She turned to me. Show me the station and the current rule set. I led her up the path. She walked with a confident, measured stride, her eyes constantly moving. She noted the red flags at the 2 path mouths without comment. Inside, she took in the operations room with a single sweeping glance. Efficient, she stated. Clay's book? I handed her the bound notebook. She flipped through it quickly, then set it aside. And your amendments? In my personal log, and 1 temporary directive I wrote this morning. I showed her. She read it, her lips pressed into a thin line. Specific locational data. You received a verbal tag on the receiver. Last night, Stone 4 compromised. And you found? A pattern in the lichen, a hooked shape. For the first time, a flicker of something, recognition, concern, crossed her face. It was gone in an instant. Noted. Do not share that detail with anyone else, ever." "What does it mean?" "It means," she said, hanging her coat on a peg, it was a dark gray, like mine, "that you are dealing with a contextual entity. It borrows from your own experience to communicate. The seaweed at the lighthouse. It's building a lexicon, your lexicon." The idea was horrifying. It wasn't just testing rules. It was learning my personal history to craft more effective lures. "The rules for 2 personnel?" I asked. "Mostly the same," she said. "Key differences. Interior patrols are now solo, but staggered. You take 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. I take 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. We never patrol together. We never both sleep at the same time. One of us is always awake and in the operations room. Radio checks are now verbal confirmation between us on the hour. Code phrases change daily. Today's is lens clear. You will respond lamp lit." It was a new layer, a human layer. It should have been a comfort. It wasn't. It was another variable, another potential point of failure. Lena proved to be a meticulous, silent partner. She learned the station's rhythms in a day. She performed her patrols with a robotic precision that matched my own. Our conversations were clipped, functional. Battery bank at 94%. Acknowledged. Well, water test clear. Perimeter check, all flags present. Confirmed. On her second night, during her 11 p.m. patrol, I was in the operations room monitoring the screens. I saw her on the interior camera, moving past the storage room door. She paused. She looked at the salt line I had poured days before. She did not comment. She continued her check. The next morning, she said, "The salt line at the storage room, your initiative." Yes, after an interior manifestation. She nodded. Sound practice, keep it fresh. Add a line at the threshold of the sleeping quarters as well. That was it. No further questions. It was as if we were both speaking a language of pure function. On her 4th day, the force launched its most sophisticated assault yet. It began at 10 p.m., just after my patrol. Lena was in the operations room. I was preparing for a few minutes of rest in the sleeping quarters. The main radio buzzed, not the receiver, the outgoing set. A voice came through, crisp and clear. It was my voice. "Lena, come in. This is the keeper. I'm at the well. I've spotted an intruder on the eastern perimeter. I'm pursuing. Request, you secure the station and monitor from within. Do not repeat. Do not come outside. Acknowledge." I froze in the doorway. I was standing 10 feet from the sleeping quarters. I hadn't spoken. On the monitor, I saw Lena's hand hover over the microphone. Her face was a mask of concentration. She knew I was inside. She could see me on the interior camera. But the voice was perfect. The procedure described was plausible, spotting something, giving an order to lock down. She keyed the mic. Acknowledge, securing station, use code phrase for next contact. The code phrase, the one we'd established for the day. Lens clear, lamp lit. There was a pause from the radio. Then my voice returned, slightly strained. Negative, no time, it's close. Just lock it down. A perfect evasion, an urgent, believable reason to bypass protocol. Lena did not respond. She released the mic and looked directly at the camera where I was standing. She made a sharp, cutting motion across her throat. Stay silent. We waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then, from outside, near the well, a shout, my voice full of pain. "Lena, it got me. My leg. I'm at the well. I need help." It was a classic lure. An injured comrade. The ultimate temptation to break the rule, to cross the threshold after dark. Lena's face was stone. She did not move. The cries continued for a minute, then turned to moans, then to silence. An hour later, at 11:11 p.m., the receiver radio activated. The numbers came, flawless. After end sequence, the automated voice added, "Mimicry, upgrade, threshold, test." Lena transcribed the numbers, then the extra words. She showed them to me without comment. The next day, she added a new amendment to Clay's book, writing in neat, block letters. Amendment 7. Vocal mimicry may now replicate keeper-to-keeper communications and simulate injuries. All requests to breach containment, regardless of perceived source or urgency, must be verified by a physical, pre-arranged signal visible on the interior monitors. Current signal. Place hand flat against the window of the operations room for 5 seconds. We had become a team, bound not by camaraderie, but by shared survival and increasingly complex rules. The days grew shorter, the nights longer. We fell into a strained but effective symbiosis. The presence of another person didn't lessen the dread. It changed its shape. Now I had to worry about her compliance as well as my own. I found myself listening for the exact timing of her patrols, verifying she used the correct code phrases. On day 50, during a lull in the afternoon, Lena spoke unprompted. "You've adapted well, better than most." "What happens to most?" I asked. "They break, usually around the 2-month mark of total service. The Lighthouse, then here. The cumulative pressure. They either become uselessly catatonic, or they decide the rules are superstition and open a door at the wrong time." She was cleaning a sensor head with a cloth, not looking at me. "And then they become part of the environment, another voice in the forest, another shape by the stones." She said it as matter-of-factly as one might discuss equipment failure. "What are they?" "The things outside." She finally looked at me. "Does it matter? You know what they do. You know how they behave. Giving them a name, a taxonomy, it gives them a shape in your mind. That shape can be used against you. Better to think of them as pressures. Natural forces with a malicious intelligence, like a sentient storm that learns your name." It was the most anyone had ever said about the nature of the threat. It wasn't an explanation. It was a warning against seeking one. That night, the storm hit. A real one. A brutal, late autumn gale that shook the station and plunged the region into a blackout. Our generator hummed, but the monitors flickered with each lightning strike. The wind screamed like the voices, but this was a purely natural fury, which was almost a relief. At 1 a.m., during my patrol, the lights went out. Generator failure. The battery bank kicked in, powering only the essential monitors and the receiver radio. The operations room was lit by the eerie green glow of the screens. Lena was already moving. Rule 8. Fuel was at 42% at refuel. This is mechanical. I'll check the shed. You maintain the perimeter. This was a breach of protocol. We weren't supposed to go outside together, or for one to go, while the other wasn't on a scheduled patrol. But this was a real, practical emergency. No power meant no perimeter lights, no white noise generator, a drained battery bank within hours. "It's after dark," I said. "It's an emergency. There's a protocol for this." She was already putting on her coat. "You know it. Clay's book, last section, generator failure during active hours." I did know it. It was a subset of the extended containment procedure. It allowed for a single, timed expedition to the shed if the failure occurred between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. The rules were strict, 10-minute maximum absence. The remaining keeper was to watch via the exterior camera and give a single flash of the signal lamp from the door at the 5-minute mark. "I'll watch from the door," I said. 10 minutes, not a second more. She nodded, took a heavy wrench from the tool rack, and unbolted the door. The wind tore it open, bringing in a spray of cold rain. She vanished into the roaring darkness. I went to the door, signal lamp in hand. I watched the camera feed for the shed on the one monitor still showing an exterior view. I saw her flashlight beam appear, saw her enter the shed. I started the stopwatch. Rain drove horizontally across the clearing. The trees thrashed. The white stones were invisible in the gloom. At the 5-minute mark, I raised the signal lamp and flashed it once, a stark beam cutting through the rain toward the shed. On the monitor, I saw her flashlight beam wave in acknowledgement from within the shed window. The stopwatch ticked. 6 minutes, 7 minutes. At 8 minutes and 30 seconds, her figure emerged from the shed, running hunched against the wind. She was back at the door at 9 minutes and 10 seconds. I pulled her inside, through the bolts. She was soaked, breathing hard. "Fuel line clog. Fixed it. Should come on in a minute." We stood in the dark, listening. A minute later, the generator coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The lights flickered on. The monitors stabilized. We had broken a minor protocol to uphold a major one. We had survived. But the storm had masked other things. When we did the full damage assessment at first light, we found it. Not at the shed or the station. At the well. The heavy lead-lined cover was lying on the ground, 5 feet away. The well was open, and the pump handle was moving up and down, slowly, rhythmically, on its own, as if an invisible hand was working it. Lena and I stood well back, watching. The motion was steady, 30 strokes per minute, exactly the priming rate. "It's learning our rituals," Lena said, her voice hollow. We followed a new, grim protocol of our own devising. We did not approach. We used the retrieval pole from a distance to try and drag the cover back over the well. The pole's gripper jaws slipped on the wet metal. On the third attempt, as the pole extended over the open well, the pump handle stopped. From the dark hole, a sound bubbled up. Not water, a wet, gargling laughter. We left the cover. We retreated to the station. We sealed the door and poured a double line of salt. We would use only reserve water now. The well was no longer a resource. It was an active threat. The siege was no longer outside the walls. It was in the very infrastructure. The final 2 weeks were a descent into a silent, procedural war of attrition. The open well became the focal point. We could see it from 2 windows and its dedicated camera feed. The pump handle would move at random intervals, sometimes for a few strokes, sometimes for hours. No water was ever drawn up. It was a pantomime, a mockery of my daily ritual. Lena and I communicated less and less, using only the essential code phrases and log entries. The strain of constant vigilance, compounded by the loss of a primary resource, was etching itself into our faces. We moved like automatons, conserving energy, conserving words. We implemented a water rationing schedule, measuring every ounce from the reserves. We cut non-essential power. The station grew colder, darker. The forest, perhaps sensing our heightened vulnerability, increased its efforts. The mimicry became more subtle. I would be in the operations room and hear Lena's voice call my name from the sleeping quarters. But when I checked, she would be on the other side of the building and hadn't spoken. She reported the same, hearing my footsteps behind her when I was ahead. It was a strategy to breed mistrust, to make us question each other's presence and actions. We countered it with a new, rigid protocol. Before any verbal interaction, The initiating party would tap the metal desk leg twice with their boot. A simple, physical signal hard to mimic accurately from a distance. On day 55, the receiver radio delivered its most chilling message yet. After the numbers, the voice said, "Reserves, low, partner, false." Lena and I looked at each other across the operations room. The accusation hung in the air. It was a masterstroke. It targeted our last remaining vulnerability, our reliance on each other. "It's trying to split us," Lena said, her voice flat. "Standard divide and conquer tactic. Log it, ignore it." But the seed was planted. I found myself watching her more closely. Was her patrol exactly 9 minutes? Did she sometimes look at the open well with an expression that wasn't quite disgust, but something like recognition? 3 days later, the event occurred that nearly broke us. It was during my 1 a.m. patrol. I was checking the windows on the north side. As I passed the small, high window in the bathroom, I saw a reflection in the black glass. Not my own. It was Lena's reflection. She was standing behind me in the bathroom doorway, her face pale and still, holding the large wrench from the tool rack. I spun around. The doorway was empty. My heart slammed against my ribs. I finished the patrol, my skin crawling. When I returned to the operations room, Lena was at the desk, writing in the log. The wrench was on its rack on the far wall. "Everything secure?" she asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, then returned to her writing. Had it been a mimicry, projected into the reflective surface? Or had it been a genuine glimpse of intent? Rule 10 dealt with reflections acting independently, but this was a reflection of someone else. I didn't mention it, neither did she. The silence between us thickened. The breaking point came on day 58. Our water reserves were critically low. We had maybe 2 days left. The supply drop wasn't for another 6 days. We were in the operations room discussing options in terse, pragmatic terms. "We can distill seawater from the jetty," I said. "It's a 4-hour process for a quart. Risky, going out there that long, even in daylight." "The rain catcher on the roof is contaminated," Lena said. The last sample showed the same moving sediment as the well. "Then distillation is the only—" The main radio interrupted. It was Captain Rye's voice, frantic, broken by static. "Mayday Oster, hull breach, taking on water, making for your jetty. Prepare for emergency evacuation. I have your relief on board. Do you copy?" Lena's head snapped up. Her eyes met mine. This was different. This wasn't a lure for one of us. This was a scenario that demanded a joint response, an evacuation order, a boat in tangible distress, and a promise, your relief on board. If it was real, we were abandoning our post during an emergency. A complex but plausible scenario. If it was false, it was a trap designed for two. "Code check," Lena said sharply. "If it's really Rye, he'll know the secondary code. We had never established a secondary code with Rye. We only ever saw him at drops." The radio crackled again. "No time for codes. We're sinking. Be on the jetty in 10 minutes, or we leave without you." The voice was perfect. The urgency was palpable. Lena's hand was on the microphone. Her knuckles were white. The rational human part of the brain screamed that this was a real mayday, that people were about to die. I looked at the monitors. The jetty camera showed only crashing waves and rain. No boat lights. "It's not there," I said. "It could be just off camera," she countered, but her voice lacked conviction. "The rule," I said, forcing the words out. "Rule 9, If no boat is visible, do not respond. This is an emergency protocol super session, she snapped, a crack in her icy composure. They're telling us to evacuate. They told me to evacuate with Mara's voice from a vent, I shot back. It's the same play, a bigger stakes version. We stared at each other, a chasm of decision between us. She was the trainer. She had more experience. But I had survived the Lighthouse. I had survived the silent breach. I knew the cost of bending the rules. We do not respond, I said, each word a stone. We lock down. We wait for dawn. For a terrifying second, I thought she would key the mic. I thought she would break. Then her shoulders slumped. The fire drained from her eyes, replaced by a weary, familiar dread. She released the microphone. You're right. We did not go to the jetty. We locked the station down and endured a night of screaming winds and phantom boat horns that sounded exactly like the Osters. No boat came. No one arrived. At dawn, exhausted and parched, we saw it on the jetty camera, washed up on the rocks, a piece of splintered wood painted red, matching the Oster's hull color. A perfect piece of set dressing. It had been a trap, a magnificent, multi-layered trap, and we had barely avoided it. That was the moment Lena truly looked at me, not as a trainee, but as an equal, a fellow survivor. The last vestiges of doubt between us evaporated, burned away by shared, narrow escape. We need water, I said, my throat dry. Today. We devised a plan. It was risky, but it was all we had. We would use the retrieval pole and a sealed container to collect rainwater from the roof gutter at the east corner. It was the only point where we could reach beyond the building without stepping outside the station's physical walls. We would filter and boil it twice. The operation took all morning. We collected 3 gallons of filthy rainwater. The boiling process using precious fuel took hours. But by afternoon, we had 2 gallons of potable, if stale-tasting, water. It bought us 3 more days. The final test came on the last night, day 62. It was quiet, too quiet. The forest was silent. The well pump was still. No voices, no mimicry, no figures on the monitors. Lena was on the 11 p.m. patrol. I was monitoring. She was in the storage room doing her check. On the camera, I saw her kneel to inspect something on the lower shelf. Then, the camera feed for the storage room dissolved into static. At the same moment, the lights in the operations room dimmed. The battery bank monitor plummeted from 60% to 10% in seconds. A power drain, an internal attack on our systems. From the storage room, I heard a sound, a wet, dragging sound, followed by a soft thump. "Lena!" I called out, tapping my boot twice on the floor. No response. I grabbed the retrieval pole, the closest thing to a weapon I trusted, and moved to the storage room door. It was closed. The salt line was undisturbed. "Lena, code phrase," I said, louder. Silence. I reached for the door handle, then stopped. This was a classic scenario. Lure one keeper into an enclosed space with an anomaly. Isolate and eliminate. I backed away. I went to the operations desk. The battery was at 5%. The lights were faint. The only monitor still working was the one for the jetty, running on a separate, isolated circuit. I had a choice: investigate and potentially fall into a trap, or follow the last, most dire protocol. Last resort. Use only if silence falls completely for more than 30 minutes during an active breach. There was silence, and a missing partner constituted an active breach. I went to the floor panel. I lifted it. I stared at the red switch. This is not an escape plan. Was this it? Was Lena already gone, absorbed into the station's darkness, Was this the final push to make me destroy the outpost and myself in a failed act of denial? I thought of the rules. Their core principle was not aggression, but maintenance. Not attack, but defined response. The dispersion charge was an end, not a response. I closed the panel. I would not give it that victory. Instead, I did the only thing left that was pure, unbreakable procedure. I went to the receiver radio. It had its own battery. It was still on. It was 11:11 p.m. I sat and waited. At exactly 11:11, the radio hissed. The automated voice began. Sequence follows: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. It was the numbers in perfect consecutive order. Something I had never heard. Something fundamentally right. End sequence. A pause. Then, siege, lifted, partner, safe, dawn, relief. The radio went dead. I sat in the profound silence, the words echoing. A reward for not choosing the final option? A new, more clever lure? Or was the diagnostic finally reporting a clear, stable state? I did not move for an hour. The battery bank died completely. The station was in darkness, save for the faint glow of the jetty monitor and my flashlight. Then, from the storage room, a sound. The bolt sliding back. The door opened. Lena stood there, pale but unharmed. In her hand was a small, blackened component, a burnt-out capacitor. Secondary battery regulator shorted, she said, her voice hoarse. Caused a feedback loop that fried the camera and drained the main bank. I was repairing it. The silence. It must have been a coincidental lull, or a response to the system failure. The radio, I said. At 11:11, it said the siege was lifted, partner safe, dawn relief. She walked to the window, peered out at the absolute black. Either it's telling the truth, or it's offering the most convincing peace treaty ever written. She looked at me. What do you believe? I thought of the consecutive numbers, the first perfectly orderly sequence I'd ever received. I believe we follow the protocol until relieved. We wait for dawn. We sat in the dark operations room, backs to the wall, watching the jetty monitor. We did not sleep. The dawn, when it came, was clear and cold. The first rays of sun lit the clearing, the white stones, the quiet well. The pump handle was still. At 800 hours, I powered up the emergency radio beacon, sending the prearranged rotation complete request extraction signal. At 2 p.m. precisely, 3 horn blasts echoed across the water. The Oster appeared, looking whole and undamaged. We watched it approach on the monitor. Captain Rye was alone on deck. We gathered our kits. I left Clay's notebook on the desk with our added amendments. I left my personal log beside it. On a fresh sheet of paper, I wrote a clean, consolidated list of core rules, incorporating the most critical amendments. I titled it, Station Protocols, Revised. Lena watched me. For the next one. Yes. We walked down to the jetty. The air was crisp, clean. The forest looked like just a forest. Rye helped us aboard. As the engine churned and we pulled away, he looked at us. Rough rotation. Lena and I exchanged a glance. A flicker of understanding passed between us. A shared memory of phantom voices and silent, staring figures. Uneventful, I said. He snorted as if he knew it for the lie it was, and turned to the wheel. I looked back at the station as it dwindled. It looked small, insignificant. A dark smudge against the endless green. I could still feel the ghost of the 9-minute patrol in my legs. I could still hear the cadence of the boundary litany in my pulse. Lena was silent beside me, staring at the horizon. We did not speak during the 4-hour return journey. There was nothing to say that the other didn't already know. At the harbor, she shouldered her bag. "You'll be contacted," she said. "For the next assignment. The pay scales again. The rules get more intricate. Will you be there? Perhaps. Or someone like me. Good luck, Keeper." She walked down the dock and was swallowed by the crowd. I stood there for a long time, the solid ground feeling unreal beneath my feet. The noise of the town was a jarring cacophony. I went to my rented room above the chandlery. The chair was still wedged under the doorknob. I moved it. I sat on the bed. I took out my wallet. Inside, folded behind a useless credit card, was the original laminated list from the Lighthouse. Rule 10, the previous keeper, Armitage, is no longer here. I looked at the window. The sun was setting. At 6 p.m., precisely, I found myself pacing the small room. 11 paces one way, 7 the other. I did it 3 times. I stopped at the window. My reflection in the darkening glass was pale, my eyes shadowed. It matched my movements exactly. For now. I turned away and began to count, not to 30. I counted the hours until a new letter might arrive. I counted the steps to the door. I counted my breaths. The rules were the only reason I was still alive. And so, I kept counting. The letter came 7 days later, slipped under my door while I slept. The same cream paper. It was waiting on the floor when I opened my eyes at 5:48 a.m. My internal clock now immune to the false peace of a town. Mr. Keeper, your performance at the remote monitoring station has been evaluated as exceptional under duress. Your ability to synthesize and enforce procedural amendments has been noted. A permanent position is now offered. The assignment is indefinite, with a renewable annual contract. Compensation is a monthly stipend 20 times your previous Lighthouse rate, with hazard multipliers for active containment events, full medical, dental, and a unique pension plan, vested after 10 years of service. Your role, Resident Keeper Supervisor, the Long Watch Repository. Attached is a non-disclosure agreement of 127 pages. The summary is this: you will never speak of your work to anyone outside the organization. In return, you will want for nothing material, and you will engage in work of paramount importance. If interested, be at the Greyhound Terminal, Locker 117, at 3 p.m. today. Use key code 4557. Inside are travel documents, a ticket, and a preliminary briefing. Burn this letter. I burned it. I watched the flames, counting the seconds until the last corner blackened and curled. 17. At 2:55 p.m., I stood in the stale, diesel-scented air of the bus terminal. Locker row 117 was a standard metal box. The code 4557 worked. Inside was a thick manila envelope, a train ticket to a city 1,000 miles inland, and a simple key on a steel chain. The train journey took a day and a night. I read the briefing. It was dry, technical, and terrifyingly vast. The Long Watch Repository was not a single location. It was a network, a subterranean complex built during a period of heightened geopolitical and metaphysical anxiety in the mid-20th century. Its purpose: to archive, study, and contain objects, texts, and phenomena that exhibited persistent anomalous properties. It was, the briefing stated, a library of broken rules. My station would be Sub-Level 7, Sector Gamma, a self-contained habitation and monitoring suite adjacent to a secured vault cluster. My duties: maintain environmental stability, perform scheduled integrity checks on the vaults, enforce the security protocols for the sector, and train one assistant keeper who would arrive after my orientation. The pay was an absurd number. The pension was a promise of quiet retirement in a secured community with others who had served. It was a gilded cage for a mind already in one. I got off the train in a nondescript city. A black sedan with no license plates was waiting. The driver wore sunglasses and said nothing. We drove for 2 hours into the hills, then through an unmarked gate, down a long, sloping tunnel, and into an underground garage that smelled of concrete and ozone. A woman in a severe gray pantsuit met me. Her ID badge read, Director Hollis. "Keeper," she said. "Follow me." The elevator descended for a long time. The doors opened onto a clean, well-lit corridor that hummed with hidden machinery. It looked like a hospital or a lab. It felt like a tomb. "This is the residential and administrative spire," Hollis explained, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "Your sector is 4 levels down. You will have a week of orientation. The rules here are extensive. They are codified in the master manual, which you will be required to memorize. Sector Gamma has its own supplemental volume." She led me to a quarters unit, a small apartment with a bed, a kitchenette, and a desk. On the desk was a stack of binders, each 3 inches thick. The top one was labeled Master Manual, Volonage 1, Foundational Protocols and Personnel Conduct. "The most important rule," Hollis said, pausing at the door, "is that you are here to keep things in, not to understand them. Curiosity is not a virtue here. It is a contagion. Your predecessor, Keeper Simmons, developed an acute curiosity about Vault G7. He is now a patient in our medical wing. He believes he is a set of filing cabinets. Do not visit him." She left. I sat at the desk. I opened the first binder. The rules began not with numbers, but with a hierarchy. Principle 1, the barrier is physical, procedural, and psychological. Principle 2, the anomaly seeks correspondence, sympathy, and expression. Principle 3, the keeper is a neutral function. You are not a scholar, you are a lock. The specific rules flowed from these principles. They covered everything from the correct pressure for the hydraulic seals on the vault doors. 425 psi, no more, no less, to the approved brand of notebook for log keeping. Mead, Jadasthi 34, 167, black cover only. There were rules for which cleaning solutions could be used near which vaults, rules for the pitch and tone of one's voice when speaking over the intercom to certain sectors, rules for the order in which light switches in a corridor must be flipped. The orientation week was a blur of training modules, safety drills, and tours of non-sensitive areas. I was fitted for 2 uniforms, a gray daily wear jumpsuit and a LC black response suit with reinforced seams and a closed-circuit air supply. I was given a chronometer synchronized to the repository's atomic clock and a palm-sized device called a protocol actuator. It would vibrate with task reminders and, in an emergency, display scrolling instructions. On the 8th day, I was taken to Sub-Level 7, Sector Gamma. The elevator opened onto a short corridor ending in a heavy blast door. A keypad and a retinal scanner were beside it. "Your biometrics are encoded," said my guide, a taciturn man named Evans from security. "The door cycles on a 90-second interval. You have to be fast. The code changes daily. It's on your actuator at 0600. He showed me how to input the code, place my eye to the scanner, and enter before the heavy gears re-engaged. The door sealed behind us with a sound like a bank vault. I was in my domain. It was a hexagon-shaped central control room, about 30 feet across. 6 vault doors, each identical and numbered G1 through G6. were set into the walls. A seventh, smaller door was marked Utilities and Maintenance. Consoles with monitors showing environmental feeds, seal integrity, and motion sensors, all currently blank, hummed softly. One door led to a small living suite, bunk, kitchen, bathroom. Vault G7 is through there, Evans said, pointing to a seemingly blank section of wall between G3 and G4. It has no external door. Access is via a transfer lock from utilities. You are not cleared for G7. Its monitoring is handled remotely by a separate team. Your job is to ensure the environment for G1 through G6 remains stable. Their contents are listed in your supplemental manual. Do not open them, ever. He left me there, the blast door sealed. The silence was profound, broken only by the low hum of the air recyclers. I was home. The routine began. It was the most complex ritual of my life. 0600, wake. Code for the day appears on actuator. 061 personal hygiene. Water from the tap is to be run for exactly 2 minutes before use to flush the pipes. 0700, first full sector diagnostic. Check pressure differentials on all 6 vaults. Verify temperature. A constant 42,4 Confirm humidity, 22%. Log readings. 0800, nutritional intake. Prepackaged meals are delivered daily via a secure dumbwaiter from the level above. 900, vault seal inspection. Visually examine the perimeter of each vault door for hairline cracks or discoloration. Use the handheld sonic scanner on each door's locking mechanism. Any residents outside the 4.7, 4.9 kHz range must be reported immediately. 1100, communications check with Central Command, code phrase exchange. 1300, second diagnostic. 1500, passive listening period. Sit at the console, don provided headphones, and listen to the audio feeds from inside each vault for 15 minutes each. The sounds were usually silence or faint, unidentifiable scrapes. The rule was to note the type of sound, not to interpret it. Interpretation was for analysis, not keeping. 1700, third diagnostic. 1900, personal time, study of the master manual. 2100, final diagnostic and seal inspection. 2200, secure all consoles. Activate the nocturnal motion sensors in the control room. A precaution, nothing should be moving in here. 2300, retire to bunk, lights out. Days passed. The work was meticulous, monotonous, and utterly demanding. A variance of 0.1 degrees in temperature required a full diagnostic of the cooling systems. A flicker in a light panel meant a check of the entire electrical sub-panel. I was a mechanic for a prison that held dreams that leaked into reality. My assistant arrived in the 3rd week. His name was Leo, young, fresh out of some clandestine training program. He had a nervous energy and asked too many questions. Why does the humidity have to be exactly 22%? What's in G3? The manual just says classified resonance. Has anyone ever opened one by mistake? I answered with quotes from the manual. I drilled him on procedures until he could perform a seal inspection in his sleep. I saw myself in him from the Lighthouse days. The skepticism hiding a deep, unacknowledged fear. I hardened myself. My duty was not to mentor him, but to ensure his compliance. His life and mine depended on it. The first incident happened in the 5th week. During the 1500 listening period on Vault G2, the audio feed changed. Instead of the usual faint tapping, I heard a voice. It was my father's voice. He had died when I was 12. "Son, are you there? It's so dark in here. Let me out." The sound was crystal clear, full of a warmth and fear that twisted in my gut. The rule was clear. Note the type of sound. Do not interpret. Do not respond. I noted G2, 1507. auditory anomaly mimicking familiar human vocal patterns. Content, plea for release. I moved to the next vault's audio channel. My hands were steady. Later, Leo approached me, his face pale. Keeper, on G2, during my listen. I heard my sister. She was singing a song she used to sing to me. I looked at him. You noted it. Yes, but what does it mean? It means the containment is holding, I said, echoing a phrase from the manual. It is probing for a sympathetic frequency. You are not that frequency. You are a keeper. Note the anomaly and continue. He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes was a vulnerability. The amendments for Sector Gamma began to accumulate in my personal log. Not official ones, but my own operational notes. Note 1. G2's mimicry is personal. It tailors its lures. Do not share personal information with Leo. Depersonalize. Note 2. The light over console 3 flickers at 1423 daily. It is a faulty ballast, not an anomaly. Have it replaced on next maintenance cycle. Note 3. Leo's patrol pace is 3 seconds fast on the south side vault check. Correct it. Then came the night of the power flux. It was during Leo's sleep shift. The lights dipped to 80% for 4 seconds. All the consoles chimed a low priority alert. Environmental stability held, but the actuator in my pocket buzzed with a new, urgent message. Protocol. G5 pressure. Spike, containment, check required. Manual verification of seal G5. This was a Tier 2 emergency. It required a physical check of the vault's primary seal using a handheld gauge to verify the digital readings weren't a sensor failure. I suited up in the black response suit, leaving the helmet off for now. I grabbed the pressure gauge. Leo, monitor the console. Report any change in G5's readings. Do not touch anything else. He nodded, swallowing hard. Vault G5 was listed as containing inertial paradox, contained. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't want to. I approached the door. The digital pressure readout on the wall beside it was climbing slowly. 426 wow seika. 427. It was supposed to be a steady 425. I placed the manual gauge's sensor probe against the seal. The needle jumped to 428. The digital readout was correct. The pressure was rising. This was not a sensor failure. A rule flashed in my mind. Pressure increase in G5 may indicate attempted dimensional translation. Stabilization procedure. Apply counterpressure via auxiliary sealant injector, port alpha 5. The injector was a heavy, syringe-like device on a cart. I wheeled it over, connected the hose to the small, recessed port next to the vault door. I pumped the handle. A viscous, silvery fluid was forced into the seal matrix. On the console, Leo called out, "Pressure stabilizing, 427, 426, holding at 425.5. I kept pumping until the gauge read a steady 425. I disconnected the injector. As I did, I heard a sound from within the vault, not through the audio feed, through the door itself. A deep, resonant thud, like something massive and soft striking the inner wall. Then a whisper that seemed to come from the metal, vibrating up through the floor into my bones. Thank you. It was not a voice of gratitude. It was a voice of satisfaction, as if a test had been passed. I stepped back. I logged the event with clinical detail. Leo watched me, his eyes wide. The manual says pressure spikes are possible, I told him, my voice flat. The procedure worked. Go back to your station. But that night, in my bunk, I heard it again. The whisper, not from the vault, from the vent in my room. Thank you. I turned on the white noise generator installed above my bunk. A personal addition I'd requested. The whisper did not return. The next day, Director Hollis came down for an audit. She reviewed my logs, asked sharp questions about the pressure event, and seemed satisfied. "Keeper Simmons," she said abruptly. "The one who became filing cabinets. His curiosity was about G7, but his first mistake was with G5. He reported hearing it say, 'please.' He developed a sympathy for it. Remember, you are a lock. Locks do not feel sympathy." After she left, I checked the master manual's history log on G5. There was a redacted entry, but one line was visible. Subject Keeper Simmons initiated unauthorized audio communication following stabilization event. Result: degradation of perceptual boundaries. Simmons had talked back. Weeks turned into months. The routine was ALC, immutable. Leo became more competent. His nervousness sanded down into a dull, procedural caution. We spoke less and less. We were two functions in a system. Then the main breach happened. It started with Vault G3, classified resonance. During the listening period, the sound from G3 changed from a faint hum to a clear, perfect middle C note, sustained. It was beautiful and utterly wrong. At the same moment, every light in the control room brightened by 10%, and the temperature dropped 2 degrees. My actuator buzzed violently. Emergency protocol. G3 resonance, cascade detected. Initiate dampening sequence. The procedure was complex. It required both of us. Leo had to man the console, overriding the environmental controls, to route power to the sonic dampeners mounted around G3. I had to physically activate 4 dampener control boxes, located at the cardinal points around the vault, in a specific sequence within a 90-second window. "Leo, console override, pattern delta, now!" I barked, already moving to the first control box, northeast. He jumped into action, his fingers flying over the keys. "Overriding! Dampeners powering up!" I threw the switch on the first box. A green light blinked. Southeast box. Switch. Green light. The sustained note from G3 was now vibrating in my teeth. The lights pulsed in time with it. Southwest box. Switch. The green light flickered, then stayed amber. "Box 3 is amber," I yelled. "Power fluctuation in Sector 3, Leo called back. "Rerouting." I didn't wait. I went to the 4th box, northwest, through the switch, green light. The note from G3 wavered, became a discordant warble. I ran back to the faulty 3rd box. The manual said to apply physical percussive maintenance, a firm strike with the heel of the hand to the housing. I hit it. The light stayed amber. From the console, Leo screamed, not a scream of fear, but of sheer, overwhelming pain. I turned. Leo was writhing in his chair, his hands pressed to his ears. Blood was trickling between his fingers. The sound from G3 wasn't just in the audio feed anymore. It was in the room, a physical pressure. The monitors were showing nonsense, geometric patterns swirling on their screens. The rule for Keeper incapacitation was clear. Secure the primary objective, then attend to personnel. The primary objective was G3. I ignored Leo's screams. I looked at the damper box. The problem was internal. I needed to bypass it. The procedure for a single damper failure was to double the power load to the opposing damper. The one at northeast, box 1. I ran back to box 1, opened a small panel, and turned the override dial 2 full clicks clockwise. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and the note from G3 cut off abruptly. Silence. Leo was slumped over the console, unconscious but breathing. Blood from his ears staining his gray jumpsuit. The lights normalized. The temperature began to climb back to set point. My actuator buzzed. Cascade contained. Medical alert. personnel injured. I followed the medical protocols. I administered the on-site first aid, cleaned Leo's ears, gave him the prescribed sedative injection from the medical kit, and secured him in his bunk. I filed the incident report with Central. A medical team would collect him in the morning. I was alone again. That night, as I performed the final diagnostic, I passed Vault G3. From behind the door, now silent, came 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. It was not a plea. It was an acknowledgement. I did not answer. I logged it. Post-containment event, G3, 3 percussive contacts on interior door surface. No further action taken. Leo was taken away. He would not return. His file would be marked PTSR, Perceptual Trauma Stress Response, and he would be retired with a pension. He was lucky. A new assistant would come eventually. For now, I was alone with the 6 vaults and the silent, blank wall hiding G7. The work continued. The rituals deepened. I no longer dreamed of the outside world. I dreamed of checklists and pressure gauges. My reflection in the polished console housing was thin, gray-haired, and had eyes that checked every detail behind me. I received my first annual review. Director Hollis delivered it in person. Your compliance rate is 99.98%. The year when a 2% deviation was a late log entry by 7 seconds. Otherwise, flawless. Your contract is renewed. Your pension vesting is now at 10%. She placed a new thicker binder on my desk. Supplemental protocols. Long-term solo operations. You may be alone for some time, she said. These will help. After she left, I opened the binder. The first page was not a rule, but a statement. Solo Long Watch is the highest calling. You are no longer just a keeper. You are the integrity of the system. The rules below are not just for safety. They are for sanity. Your mind is the final vault. Guard it. The rules that followed were profoundly different. They governed self-talk, mandatory recreation periods, though there was nowhere to go. Memory exercises to prevent temporal dislocation, and strict limits on how long one could look at any one vault door. There was also a new final protocol. Last resort, solo. In the event of catastrophic containment failure across multiple vaults, or the confirmed manifestation of an anomaly within the control room, the keeper is authorized to initiate the solitude procedure. This involves retreating to the living quarters, engaging a magnetic lock that cannot be opened from the outside, and activating a neural static generator that will induce permanent, non-fatal catatonia. This ensures the keeper cannot be used as a vector for egress. This is the final duty. It was not a dispersion charge. It was something worse. It was becoming a filing cabinet, willingly. I memorized it. I filed it away. More time passed, a year, then 2. I grew older within the hexagon. My hands remained steady. My compliance was perfect. One day, the dumbwaiter delivered my meals as usual, but with a small sealed envelope. Inside was a note from Hollis. The position for Warden of Sub-Level 7 is opening. It oversees Sectors Gamma, Delta, and Epsilon. It carries a 50-fold pay increase and full vesting in 5 years. It requires the management of 3 keeper teams. The rules are exponentially more complex. Do you want it? I looked around my hexagon. At the 6 vault doors, the silent wall of G7, the console where Leo had screamed. I looked at the bunk where I slept, at the manual open on my desk. I listened to the hum of the air recyclers, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. I took a fresh sheet of Mead, Magnitude 34, 167, paper, black cover. I began to write. I did not write a reply to Hollis. I wrote a new set of rules for the next keeper of Sector Gamma. I distilled the master manual, my supplemental binders, and the hard-learned lessons from the pressure spike and the resonance cascade into a clean, precise list. I numbered them 1 through 25. I included the amendments. I described the knock from G3, the whisper from G5, the personal mimicry of G2. I outlined the solo long watch sanity protocols. I even included the note about the flickering light over console 3. I wrote with a calm, clear hand. This was my purpose. This was the only thing I had to pass on. When I finished, I placed the handwritten rules inside the master manual binder at the very front. I then picked up the reply form for Hollis. There was only one box to check: yes or no. I checked yes. The rules were the only reason I was still alive, and so I would follow them to the next circle of the labyrinth, to the deeper vault, the greater responsibility, the more intricate and terrible rules. It was the only thing I knew how to do. It was, I understood, the only thing I had ever been meant for. I placed the form in the outbound dumbwaiter and sent it up. Then I turned to begin my 700 diagnostic. The pressure in G5 was holding steady at 425 psi. The seal was clean. The lock was functioning. I was the lock, and I was at peace.